Hey everybody, welcome to our newest episode of Icons and Experts, brought to you twice a month in partnership with the Extended Stay Lodging Association. You need to get involved with them. Check out ESLA.org. That's ESLA.org. I'm Glenn Hausman. Please check out our inaugural episode, The Incredible Mike Levin. It's a must listen. Check it on the No Vacancy feed. Check it at novacancynews.com. Today's show, it's going to be a pretty good one as well. And I want to say thank you to our friends over at Red Roof Franchising. Check them out, redrooffranchising.com. They've got the Hometown Studios by Red Roof, a great extended stay, new build option for you out there. Tell them Matt Hostetler sent you. He's Chief Development Officer over there. redrooffranchising.com. You got to check those guys out. Of course, this week, we've got another icon. I'm talking none other than Jim Anhut. Plus, I'm gonna call it right now. Next icon in waiting, Jimmy Taylor. He's now with IHG. So Anhut, now he was in it before people even heard of extended stay, stretching way back to the Residence Inn, Jack DeBoer days. This is pre-Marriott. He was also instrumental in Summerfield Suites, now owned by Hyatt, that he also did with Jack in the late 1980s, and helped launch MainStay Suites for Choice in the mid-1990s. Then he went on to launch Staybridge Suites for IHG in the late 90s and was part of the IHG team that went on to buy Candlewood Suites, which was created by the aforementioned Jack DeBoer, and that happened in the early 2000s. Now he's home again, joining the board of directors at WaterWalk Holdings, also the final company that the great Jack DeBoer created. As for Taylor, he also has roots in extended stay going way back to the early 1990s with that Summerfield Suites, then Candlewood Suites in the mid-1990s, helped launch Staybridge for IHG in the late 90s. And when they got he also helps run the Army division that they got in 2009. And he was also part of the launch team for Atwell Suites in 2020. Wow. This is one filled with experts today. It's going to be amazing. Thank goodness for support from our friends over at Delasart Hospitality. Delasart Hospitality is the leader in third-party management for extended stay hotels. More than 22 years of extended stay ownership and management experience. And Delasart is the only hospitality company offering all three key services, whether together or separately: full management, remote sales support, remote revenue management services. Delasart.com for more information. All right, sit back, relax, or I don't know, maybe you're out walking the dog or you're out for a run. Enjoy this episode with Jim Anhut and Jimmy Taylor. Hey everybody, welcome to another cool episode of the Extended Stay Lodging Association's Icons and Experts, where we get to talk to some of the coolest people in the hospitality industry with a focus on our beloved extended stay sector. Today's my co-host is Jimmy Taylor of IHG. You know a thing about extended stay, don't you, man?
I know a little bit. I've been around 30 plus years, so yes, I guess I do.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool. Thanks for, I've only been around for like 28 years, so I feel like the new kid on the block over here. So that's pretty cool. So are you ready? We got a great guest today, don't we?
We really do. I mean, it's someone that I've known for almost the entire 32 years. So I really am looking forward to seeing my man.
All right. So why don't you give us an official intro for him, since you've known him for so long?
I have known him a long time. You know, I met Jim initially, Jim Anhut, with Summerfield Suites years ago. And then fast forward a couple of companies later, Jim is one of those that are helping to try to pull me away and hire me for the launch of the Staybridge Suites brand with IHG. So,
right.
Yeah. So, wow. So anyone at IHG that's sad that I've been here, we can all blame Jim.
Yeah. Hey, that sounds like a great new game show. Let's blame Jim. Yeah. We got Jim Anhut coming on right now. Jim, it's so great to see you. And man, you are definitely an icon. When I first came into the business in the mid to late 1990s, I remember, learning from you, and your focus at IHG at the time and extended stay was pretty cool. So, Summerfield, well, that was an extended stay brand back in the day, right, Jim?
Well, it was. A couple of things here. I guess I date you guys by a decade or more, having started in the mid 1980s with Jack DeBoer at Residence Inn.
And hold on one second. And again, for all of you know, Jack DeBoer's name is going to be a through line throughout this entire series. We've already talked about it before. He is really the godfather of extended stay in hospitality. Jim, please continue.
Yeah, no, just to respond to Jimmy's comment about Summerfield and to respond to your question about Summerfield, that was really the second extended stay brand that Jack and team created. But if I go back to the history lesson with Jimmy Taylor real quick, I had to chase him all the way to Huntsville, Alabama to get him to join IHG way back when. He's playing a little hard to get, but a 2-hour drive from Atlanta kind of sealed the deal, and what a remarkable deal it was on behalf of the company.
That's awesome. So, Jimmy, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, Jim, it was very interesting for sure. Schedule was out of control, and I said, well, if they want me bad enough, they'll drive to Huntsville. And when you said you would, I thought, oh gosh, I have a decision to make now. So that was funny, because at the time I was working for Candlewood Suites, which was Jack DeBoer. So there was a good loyalty to Jack, but I also know that Jim was someone that I trusted very much as well. So it was good.
A little history note, IHG wound up buying Candlewood Suites from Jack DeBoer. So, Jim, you started way back in extended stay. Did you have any idea then it would be what it would be now? And simultaneously, are you shocked it took so long?
Yeah, look, Glenn, I'm not sure that it's taken that long. It's the headlines are sensational around extended stay today, but it's not like it hasn't been around for a long, long time. Look, I'll go all the way back to my familial roots, where we had a handful of apartments on the hotel that my family owned and operated, where my father actually built apartments, extended stay hotel rooms, if you will, for relocating for motor executives in the Detroit area. So it's not that the concept hasn't been around for a long, long time. Look, the Residence Inn, Summerfield, Candlewood, Staybridge Suites, MainStay Suites, all these guys in the early days. Now you see iterations and separations in terms of pricing and lengths of stay and different stay occasions and different consumers in the various categories. But no surprise, the economics are strong. And today, if you look at what's happening out in the workforce, COVID, has kind of given everybody freedom to work from wherever, whenever, right? So that's a trend that was not prevalent back in the mid 1980s when Residence Inn was founded,
right, or
when Summerfield was founded. Look, no surprise that the segment has proliferated. The economics are sound, which of course is attractive to developers, and attractive returns to developers are the result of good product for the consumer. So, here we are, and we're capturing a lot of headlines. We're still a relatively small segment in the big scheme of things, but we'll take the headlines. We'll take the spotlights. Hey, just real quick, you guys, I'm very flattered by the introduction, but it's people like you, that make this industry go round. It's a noble profession. It's a wonderful place to work, and appreciate all both of you do to help perpetuate that spirit and that attitude of hospitality.
Well, I'll tell you what, thank you so much, first of all, for saying that. It's very, very generous of you. And secondly, this is the coolest business ever. And if we could find a way to get more people involved in it, particularly in our segment of operating and owning hotels, one day maybe I'll get there, then it's all worth it. So what was it like, guys, working together, creating Staybridge? Because that must have been a really interesting time, particularly at a time, Jim, where you said it was there, but people weren't really talking about this particular segment as much as they do today, if at all. Jimmy?
Yeah, I have to say that when we joined, it was Bass Hotels and Resorts at the time.
Yep.
When we were with IHG, and I can tell you that they were a great mid-scale brand. They had a lot of Holiday Inns, a lot of Holiday Inn Expresses, and there weren't a lot of people in the building that knew much about extended stay. So Jim and I really fought not fought. We taught, I guess is the better word. We helped teach the company the economics, the length of stay, the GOP. Let's don't look at rate over here as much as we do GOP and length of stay. And it was really, I mean, there were many times, I can remember so many times I would talk to Jim and we would talk going home and it was, but if you look at the company now, and we have over 700 Staybridge Suites, Candlewood Suites, Atwell Suites, obviously the company saw the importance of extended stay and the growth that we could have. And we have some of the best owners out there. And they were the owners that had a Holiday Inn Express and a Holiday Inn. But we taught them, okay, here's how you run extended stay. And now they just love those brands. So everything that Jim and I did, I guess, worked.
Jim?
Yeah, look, Jimmy was the basically the nucleus, if you will, the little Energizer Bunny of operations that opened our first hotel. And if it weren't for that, the brand wouldn't have the success that it's enjoyed today. You don't grow a brand in a big company without air cover and support. And I'll give you into a little history lesson of that brand in a second here. But you take people like Tom Oliver at the time, ultimately Steve Porter, Kurt Ansel, in that organization. And
right, these are all former executives with IHG.
Exactly. And look, their mirror image is across all the other big brand portfolios out there. But Jimmy alluded to the fact that we had to teach and learn them up a little bit along the way about what the segment was and why is it different. And it's not about transient; it's about people who stayed longer, and it's revenue. It's not rate. We captivated the imaginations of senior leaders. The history lesson, real quickly, if you don't know. Staybridge was, the output of what was really then Holiday Inn worldwide. We were pretty good at changing our name along the way there. And when Jimmy joined, it was Bass Hotels and Resorts. But prior to that,
along Six Continents Highway, there was that one.
So you have a good memory of that, Glenn. Good for you. But look, Holiday Inn, for those of us and some of the audience doesn't realize, Holiday Inn was actually Residence Inn. It was actually half owned by Holiday Inn back in the 1980s. So in 1980, basically 5 through 87, Holiday Inn owned, in a joint venture with Jack, owned 50% of Residence Inn. In 87, Jack, being the entrepreneur deal maker that he was, put the company back to Holiday Inn. Or his 50% Holiday Inn said, no, Jack, you take it. So he took it, arranged some bridge financing, and about 5 months later or less, the whole company was sold to Marriott.
Wow.
And then on the heels of that change, Holiday Inn, launched Homewood Suites, right? So Homewood Suites ultimately got, Holiday Inn spun off, Bass bought Holiday Inn, and once again, Holiday Inn was without an extended stay brand. So the senior leaders of the company, Tom Oliver, Craig Hunt, and others said, we're going to recruit a team to build an extended stay brand. And that's, where Jimmy and I entered the equation, given the experience that we had to launch the brand. So Holiday Inn actually owns 3 of the original extended stay brands, including Residence Inn, Homewood Suites, and now, of course, Staybridge Suites in its current, corporate iteration of Intercontinental Hotels and Resorts, or IHG. So it's we used to joke that kind of all hospitality roads led back to Memphis in terms of people and product, and that's really a great example of that.
That's really fascinating. I like it. Adds a little context to IHG's Candlewood purchase. It's like I feel like the boardroom was like, this time we're not going to make that same mistake. I love that. So what was it actually like then, once you got the green light, to go ahead with a clean slate and develop a brand from the ground up in this context?
Yeah, look, I would say that the big companies have become brand companies, right? Back then, we were operator development companies that had brands, but look, IHG and Marriott and Hilton and Accor, we all ran a lot of hotels, and it's not until we kind of head down this trail of asset light that we become brands. So, hence.
And let me just explain, because anytime we get to one of these intersections, I got to explain some stuff. So asset light was the whole idea of separating the operations from the real estate. Back in the day, Hilton would own the building and manage it. Marriott would do the same, et cetera, with a lot of major properties. One of the reasons why franchising has taken off in such a major way is because these companies became franchised, fee-based companies as opposed to just operating companies. So, Jim, please continue.
Yeah, no, perfect segue, Glenn. We're brand companies now, right? We're think of us as Procter and Gamble or Unilever or something like that. We want to proliferate our brand portfolio, and it's new Tide with some other ingredient, and now we have portfolios of 30, 35, 40 brands out there with millions of hotel rooms.
Right. So you're dealing then with old Tide or pre-Tide era in a way, right?
Yeah, let's call it original Tide.
Original, yeah.
Way back when. But look, the company, you asked what it was like way back when. So they put confidence in people like Jimmy and me to get out there, and I would characterize us as being entrepreneurs, if you will. We didn't take the entrepreneurial risk of a lot of financial risk, but we did take career risk in trying to get a brand started up, and it wasn't smooth sailing along the way. Jimmy, certainly you can attest to that. In the early days of Staybridge Suites,
let me just pop in and say, now we're used to new brands being iterated constantly. This was not the case back then. Right.
And look, there's a lot of really smart, sophisticated people that have been hired around that branding, and many have come from CPG or consumer packaged goods type companies. But look, I'll let Jimmy jump in here. It was, it wasn't smooth sailing. We had some pretty stout projections for, the first couple of hotels, and a lot of pressure on him and his team at the property level to actually deliver on numbers. And then, look, we faced all the same things that we're facing today. Construction costs were higher than we thought they would be. We had challenges with subcontractors, developers.
What about those interest rates?
Right. Yeah, well, actually, they were, of course, we had a corporate balance sheet that we were levering against. We weren't out borrowing money to develop and we built the 19 of the first 25 hotels on our balance sheet back then, which, they don't launch brands like that anymore. They rely on the franchisee community. But anyway, Jimmy, jump in here, because it was, we felt a lot of pressure early on, and there were a couple of moments where, a few people around the company wanted to put a stake in the brand, and that was an interesting experiment. But brand building in this space is a decades-long endeavor. It's not get out there and try a new formula, and if it doesn't work, you change the packaging and start something else. But hop in, my friend.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting. I think the biggest challenge that I saw was the focus that we had on sales,
right,
versus maybe and because obviously we all know that the phone might ring, but it's not going to ring with that 7+, 30+ night guest. You have to have a very serious effort when it comes to your EOS. And so I remember as soon as I started, I was given a stack, probably 30 high, of here's some candidates, try to find your DOS out of these. I looked through all of them. I called a few of them. Nope, wrong group. And I ended up hiring, and then I think you hire a personality. You hire someone that you believe has the relationship skills. I remember Jim said to me one time, Timmy, you're not a sales guy. You're a relationship guy. And I didn't really ever think of myself that way, but you have to have people that believe in you, that line up and want to follow you. And we found the right director of sales in Karen Tatro when we started that brand. And she was at a Crown Plaza. And so everyone said, Jimmy, how could this be? You're not hiring someone from the Residence Inn or the competition. I hired a person that I knew could go out and replicate and build relationships. I knew extended stay. I needed her to go out and convince people to stay there. And so it was interesting, but that was the biggest point that I noticed, was just, okay, sales is important, and I really do want to pay this person X because they are that important to us.
Yeah, and it's so important that you focus on those sales, because one of my greatest fears now, as the proliferation of extended stay continues, is that operators won't utilize it in the way that it was meant to be designed. So instead of really focusing for people for those 5 days or longer stays, I'm starting already to see a tendency to make it more transient. That's going to screw up the whole operating model. Speaking about operating models, Jim, when you're actually designing the physical structure of this product, how did you go about thinking about that in terms of making it happy for the customer and the potential owner of the property?
Now, look, Glenn, let me just rewind just a second here, because what you said about operating model is critical.
Yep.
I think that, and I appreciate what Doug Artuzio and the council is doing right now to elevate awareness around actually how to go about operating these businesses, because to Jimmy's point, these 30, 40, 90-day stays just don't come through a reservation channel. They do have to be found. So I would, if there's one point that we want to make for an audience that's interested in this arena, is you must be on the ground. And that art form of relationship building and salesmanship is maybe a little bit lost in an environment that's enabled by a lot of technology and channels that just make it easier. But anyway, the model, the original model, we had the benefit, obviously, of, in my case and in Jimmy's experience, the Summerfield launch, the Residence Inn launch, the Homewood Suites launch. We watched what they did, and I would suggest that Staybridge was actually a good product iteration that really was more efficient from a square foot utilization perspective. We introduced a smaller studio suite into the mix, which actually became a very popular extended stay accommodation for people who were just traveling by themselves. We introduced things like in storage rooms inside the hotel in this contiguous building where you had dead space. You created these little lockout storage rooms for people that had a bicycle or maybe some boxes or luggage, and that way actually you could use. You didn't have to have more space in the suite,
right?
Because if they needed to offload, some of the stuff that they were traveling with that they didn't need every single day, they could put into these storage rooms. Clearly the hospitality area, was important, and Jimmy, you certainly smile at this. Probably one of my most spine tinglings and heartwarming experiences in this industry was a guy by the name of Bob Ormland, who was one of our early franchisees up in the Washington, D.C. area. Sadly, Bob passed, at, kind of an early growth cycle of Staybridge, but his spirit and his engagement with his guests at the property level. And this is the guy that actually was a partner in the deal. I mean, he wasn't the general manager. But what we went on to do in recognition of him, and I'm pretty sure, well, Jim, you can hold me straight, that they're still carrying on the tradition where there's a chair at the front desk. It's called Bob's Chair. And it explains who Bob Ormland was and what he meant to the brand. But those chairs at the front desk were really an interesting brand hallmark. And the reason being is that you wanted people to come up and sit down and interface with the front desk staff. Mm-hmm. And the operator, the transient operators say, you can't do that. It's gonna get a big long line there. People, look, there's like 4 people that check into this hotel a day. And nobody's checking out tonight. Let's build this relationship between the staff and the guest. Who, look, when you're there for 30 days, you get kind of lonely, and it's kind of fun to have that interaction. So that was a very purposeful add to the brand standards, if you will, and it carries on today. Those stools are still at the front desk, which I'm for somebody that's been long gone from IHG, I'm thrilled that. Yeah. Has stayed. But Jimmy can maybe jump in on some of the other stuff. But I would say product is one thing, but it was really the personality and the attitude toward these guests who are staying longer. And again, I would encourage anybody who's interested in this segment to be thoughtful about that. You just don't check people in and take their money and hope that they're good. You gotta enable them along the way. In a strange environment where they're going to be for a long time.
Yeah, sure, Jimmy.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that when I think back on all the items that we really focused on, it really was the staff first, because I didn't need a transaction-oriented person at the first Staybridge. And I think I was a bit naive to realize that, wow, this is a monster company. How this first hotel does or doesn't do is going to be a quick reflection on me. And so we did tons of owners and, developers coming through the hotel. And sometimes I would know they were coming, and sometimes they would just show up. And I remember, Hilton, Marriott, everyone was coming through the first hotel, and many of them had a checkbook in their hand ready to do a deal.
Wow.
And a lot of it was based on just how do the guests interact with our staff? What are they seeing? There's a lot of good product, but what are they feeling? And I know gut feel is really important to a lot of people. And when they walked in, were you feeling like this is a brand that you wanted to do business with in the future? And so I really focused on how I can teach someone the X's and O's of a computer. I can't teach someone to care about people. And so that was the goal, was to make sure whoever we had working at that first Staybridge, and it was 18 to 22 people, they had better be the right relationship-driven individual.
Excellent.
That includes the maintenance guys.
Right.
We had a couple of people in the morning who were basically our hospitality hosts or hostesses or host people or whatever the appropriate. Anyway, we had this wonderful couple of people that were totally interactive with the guests. And that's, again, it's a little bit of an art. You got to find the right person who's willing to, help somebody, carry a plate from point A to point B, or, get something when it's out, or more importantly, interact with the way here. It's like, can I help you with anything? It's I will continue to emphasize that, the profession is noble. The privilege to serve, serving people is a privilege. And let's find and encourage that in the industry in general, and more specifically this segment.
So I knew we had done a great job early on when the first hotel opened December 6th of 98. And that Christmas, that's a tough time to open. That Christmas we had 25 or 30 rooms because it's only a few weeks later and Christmas is usually slow anyway. But I remember going by the hotel Christmas morning just to take some food to the staff and whatever. And there was 2 or 3 couples sitting around the Christmas tree. They had all met each other. They had kids because they'd relocated from somewhere else. And so there was this community Christmas tree with 3 different families and their kids opening gifts. And I knew at that moment, okay, we hit it. And that wasn't me. That was the staff that had engaged those individuals and convinced them, just have Christmas down here in the gray room. And that's what they did.
Wow. That's really a great story. So, Jim, before we wrap up, what should people thinking about investing in this incredible business be thinking about, according to you?
Let me say what you shouldn't be thinking about is the bottom line. Mm-hmm. That will come. And we've alluded to this. I think you really need to be thoughtful about the staff that you have at the property level and accommodating people who are, in a strange place for fairly long periods of time. Put yourself in their shoes. What would they need? It's like, look, I need to know where the dry cleaner is. I need to know where some of the better restaurants are. I need to know where I can get my car washed. I mean, just basic stuff. And so what are you doing to accommodate those people at the property level? And look, the brands are going to give you all kinds of templates and training programs and things like that, but it's the execution thereof that is critical. So be thoughtful about the top line. There's not a lot of moving parts between the top line and the bottom line. That's pretty, the operating side of the model is not complicated, but you got to find the right people to execute the attitude is what I would say, this extended stay attitude.
You're right. And it's not a transaction. It is a relationship. We mentioned that earlier. And one of the things that gets a lot of hotels in trouble is they quickly send all their calls to the 1-800 line. And you know what? There's a point for that. But as Jim mentioned, if you're wanting to know about the area and you need to know, hey, I'm going to be living here 6 months while I relocate my family, you need to know, what about the schools? Tell me these things. And that's where a director of sales or a very, very good front desk person comes in.
I love that. You've got to think a little bit more than just about housing, but the quality of life that the people will experience while staying with you. Gentlemen, really great words of advice. Jim Anhut, thanks so much for everything you do in the industry and for being here with us today. Really appreciate you.
Glenn, I appreciate you a lot too. And listen, I love the space. You know, I come full circle now. I work, you know, on the board of directors with WaterWalk, which is Jack's last company. Is his very wonderful and forward-leaning and good leader, granddaughter Mimi Oliver, is running the company right now. But I will offer generously, as Doug Artuzio has, to help guide people, you know, through their decision-making process as it relates to this segment. It is a wonderful segment, and it's a cool way to get to know your guests and accommodate people who really need those accommodations, you know, that kind of accommodating spirit and atmosphere when they're away from home for a long period of time. So the offer stands, and looking forward to continuing to engage with the council. And again, appreciate your making some time for us to talk.
Great. I appreciate all of you guys out there. So for Jim, Jimmy, and myself, Glenn, thanks for watching another episode of the Extended Stay Lodging Association's Icons and Experts series. See you next time.